Good evening, everybody. I thank you all for coming here today. The Conscience Network, my latest book, was launched in New Delhi last week. But the feeling I have is that until the book is unwrapped in Bangalore, it has not really seen light. Like the Kannada writer Chandrasekhar Patil, with whose poem From the Emergency Days this book begins, had once spoken of a lobby Nagara and a Gulabi Nagara. Now that we have left Delhi behind, we could conveniently say that Delhi is a lobby Nagara and Gulabi Nagara is our home. That's Bangalore. Thank you. Home is home. Home turf is always special. In one of my earlier books, Pickles from Home, The Worlds of a Bilingual, published in 2012, I had asked, quote, "Is it true that whatever may be our success in the outside world, the ultimate celebration and the final preservation happens only in our home or hometown? Why do we often hear people say that they want to get back to their roots? Does it finally mean nothing if you cannot connect with your own people? Is this a great civilizational formula to provide security to human beings? Why do we always think that the final resting place should always be one's hometowns? At times, haven't we seen old graves in alien lands being shifted to secure homelands? How much ever we may globalize, can we really escape the local? Why is it that your pickle is always from home?" Unquote. So this is what I had written in 2012. Recalling this paragraph also resonates with the story of my latest book, The Conscience Network, a chronicle of resistance to a dictatorship. It is the celebration at home of the courageous and principled actions of what the protagonists of my book did in faraway lands. Thousands of miles away from home, it was not spoken about or written about until it was discovered for this book 50 years later. The papers were all buried in archives, attics, and morgues in distant corners of the world, but have now been brought to light and given life in our hometowns. When I was writing my talking points this morning, I was rather thrilled to realize this thread that continued in my writing. It was as if a theoretical question I had asked in 2012 had found substantiation and proof in 2025. I also chuckled, thinking of my protagonists and me. They're all here. Professor Anand Kumar is here, Dr. Ravi Chopra is here, Mr. S.R. Hiremat is here. I chuckled thinking of my book's protagonists and me. It was like the Italian playwright Luigi Pirandello's 6 characters in search of an author, although not so absurd. And it was me who went in search of them in the case of this book and asked them to complete their stories. The completion of their stories is what you will find in this book. Now, I came with a prepared script because I have a tendency to go on talking, and in Delhi I extended my time. So I told myself that I'll be a little disciplined and come with a written script. So I'm just, please be happy that I'm reading out. So I'm really grateful that you have all come here today. I'm especially grateful that Justice Santosh Hegde is here. He is an icon of our times. An applause, please. I did not know him so much as a Supreme Court judge. But like millions of others in Karnataka, I became familiar with him because of his extraordinary public service as a Lokayukta. That institution has lost its halo ever since he stepped down. And I should also incidentally mention here that the organizer of this program, the Paradarshak Foundation, which is run by G. Mahantesh, after Mr. Hegde had stepped down, wrote 50 stories under my editorship in the Asianet and Kannada Prabha, which exposed the corruption in the office of the Lokayukta. And, a lot of people had to go to jail, and finally the Lokayukta had to resign. So that has been the state of affairs with that institution ever since an icon like Justice Santosh Hegde has stepped down. It's a very sorry state of affairs. And you are probably reading all that's happening now in the papers. I was happy to be writing for the Outlook magazine when Justice Hegde was neck deep in unearthing humongous illegalities in the iron ore mines of Karnataka. Justice Hegde did big things that brought about a huge difference. He inspired us. I have the tiny satisfaction to have called the Ballari illegalities as the Reddy Republic in what was the first ever national coverage of the mining scam. The first ever criminal defamation case in the mining scam was against me and my editor, Vinod Mehta. One day, when Vinod was having his beer in the afternoon, he suddenly said, "Why don't we go and see Justice Hegde?" I said, "Sir, he's a big man. It may be difficult to get an appointment." He said, "Let's barge in." That was Vinod's attitude. So I took Mr. Vinod Mehta to see Justice Hegde. And I remember the warmth of the meeting, but not the details. It is that mining scam that is common between Justice Hegde, Mr. S.R. Hiremat, who is one of the protagonists of this book, and I, from discussing corruption to reflecting on the conscience network, my relationship with Mr. S.R. Hiremat has only deepened. He's not, a lot of friends know this, he's not very easy to deal with. But I have never seen him go against his conscience and the collective conscience. That is very true about Justice Hegde also. Mr. Chiranjeev Singh, the other guest here today, has been an elder of our family. He has been involved in all the books I have published since 2004. That is from 21 years ago. I have no words to thank him for his continuing generosity. I have always said that he is like the Kabir painting that hangs in his living room. I forget if it is by Paresh Maiti or Paresh Hazra. He's like that Kabir painting that hangs in his living room. Soft, saintly, yet with a stubborn resolve to act compassionately at all times. That is Mr. Chiranjeev Singh. When I dedicated my previous book to him, the Rahul Gandhi book, I borrowed lines from poet Bendre to describe him. You can guess which poem that was. I'll just read the English translation and probably give you a hint in Kannada later. I dedicated to him and I said, "In an easterly home, when the doors open, light flows out to wash the world and fill it with graciousness." So that was my dedication line to Mr. Chiranjeev Singh. And this was this very famous Kannada poem by Bendre, "Moodala maneya muttina neerina yarakava hoida, nunnane yarakava hoida, bagilu teredu ಬೆಳಕು ಹರಿದು ಜಗವೆಲ್ಲ ತೊಯ್ದ ನುಣ್ಣನೆ ಜಗವೆಲ್ಲ ತೊಯ್ದ. That is Chiranjeev Singh for me. But, he has also a notorious reputation to be here on the stage today. And that is, he was the chief censor of Karnataka during the emergency. But, he has been telling me that he never censored anything because the media, submitted itself without any censorship. So he was the chief censor of Karnataka as well. Again, Professor K. Marula Siddhappa has been family, more than family to us. The bonds that our family share from my father's time, he was also my father's teacher, till now has only deepened. His son, the very well-known filmmaker Chaitanya, and I went to the University of Hyderabad together around the same time. But outside the family connection, what has made me admire Professor KMS is his rational and no-nonsense approach to things, both intellectual and non-intellectual, towards life and towards life in general. Absolutely no-nonsense, rational approach. He has always argued for public causes. Ever since I've been a child, I remember he's always argued for public causes and the public good, and has kept the conscience of the Kannada literary world alongside people like P. Lankesh. He was, until recently, an indefatigable contributor to the letters to the editor column in newspapers. I used to always open the newspapers and would be delighted to see his letter on one issue or the other. If he writes no more, that is because there is little space for an independent public intellectual like him in the media today. That's a sad thing, but that's true. And I'm just trying to tell you why these guests are here. I have no other reason to be standing here. Because they'll all speak on the book, but I should tell you why they are here. I'm happy now that I get an opportunity to acknowledge that Mr. A.V.S. Nambudri has been a huge formative influence when I began journalism. He was a quiet and gentle mentor in the Deccan Herald newsroom, and one of those who could speak about both Mayakovsky and Mayavati with equal ease and insight. I have always enjoyed the unpretentious confluence of current affairs, culture, and literature in his prose, which, by the way, could never be deciphered when he wrote in longhand. When he wrote in longhand, it would be like a running river. You could never read. But it started sparkling the moment his editorial assistant had typed it up, had put it on paper, typed, and gave you a typed script. When I wrote the Rahul Gandhi book, he made the most brilliant psychological reading of it. He has been threatening, or rather speaking, of writing a book on the tragic design of cricket, historically linking it to the emergence of the Elizabethan tragedy in England. I sincerely hope he does, because it will unsettle a lot of euphoric cricket histories and historians. So I feel blessed that they're all here today. And I will not do much talking on the book, because I believe it has to be read, and there are others who will be speaking about it after me. Instead, I will read a small passage from the book. In Delhi, I chose to read about the 4 romances in the book. But today, I will read about how T.N. Kaul, India's ambassador to the United States, romanced with the idea of Indira Gandhi's dictatorship. So in Delhi, I read those 4 romances because, there were people in the audience and on the stage trying to quickly reduce the book to something else, So I just had to rescue my book, so I had lightened the mood in Delhi by reading romances. And I had also read about the romance of Mr. Ravi Chopra and Joe McGowan, who are happily here with us today, and then about S.R. Hiremat and his American wife, Mavis Sigwald, and a couple of others, Laila Kabir and George Fernandez. So I had done that, but here I will be reading this romance of ideas that existed between T.N. Kaul and Indira Gandhi's dictatorship. But before I do the reading, can I request my son, Sumeru, who is in his second year of PhD in cell biology at the Indian Institute of Science, to receive a copy of the book from Mr. Chiranjeev Singh. This book is dedicated to him, and I take the dedication lines for the book from a vachana of the 12th century mystic Allama Prabhu, which has kept me company for years. It was the singing of this great vachana by Mallikarjun Mansur that I was first introduced to this Vachana, and it goes like this. I will read it in Kannada. Sumeru, can you please come up and get a copy from Mr. Chiranjeev Singh? So the dedication lines I gave you the dedication lines that I had written for Mr. Chiranjeev Singh, and the dedication lines for Sumeru in this book is, "For Sumeru, my son, the sky, Mount Meru, and the temple is where one is." So this is from a Vachana of Allama Prabhu, which I'm sure a Kannada audience here will love to listen. So it goes like this. And it's sung beautifully by Mallikarjun Mansur. If you haven't heard the rendering of Mallikarjun Mansur, you've missed something. Please go back and listen to it. Ihaloka, Paraloka taniddalli, Gagana Meru Mandira taniddalli, Sakala Bhuvana taniddalli, Satya Nitya Niranjana Shivatattva taniddalli, Uttarottara Chaturvalaya taniddalli, Chandra Surya Taramandala taniddalli, Antara Mahadantara taniddalli, Swatantra Guheshwara Linga taniddalli. So this is from Allama Prabhu. So now I'll get back to reading from the book. This is from the chapter called A Diplomat on a Mission. So I'll get into it. So T.N. Cowell was a very interesting character. I try to visualize his behavior and character. And he was very close to the Nehru Gandhi family. He was actually part of the Kashmiri cabal that surrounded Indira Gandhi. And he was also, before he went to Washington in 1973, he was also India's ambassador to USSR. And you will see in my book the letters that he wrote to Indira Gandhi even before she became anything, sharing confidential information with her, calling her, "Oh, my dear Indu, this is what is happening in Soviet Union. Oh, you should come to a holiday to Moscow. Oh, let's go to Kashmir together." That was the kind of relationship. But then gradually when she became Prime Minister, there's a very deferential voice, and he starts addressing her as "Dear Prime Minister." And this is, he is doing this propaganda in America. We hear about propaganda so much these days, but you should read the classic propaganda that T.N. Cowell unleashed in America to understand the kind of machinery Indira Gandhi had to defend her emergency, all the wrong that she had done. So this is T.N. Cowell, and he was an over-enthusiastic character. He would go to, American universities and just take a tape recorder in his hand and he'd say, "I am going to record what I'm going to speak." And then switch on the tape recorder and get a transcript of his speech, get it corrected, make fair copies of it and put it into his file. If that man had not done that, you wouldn't have had this book today. He has in his enthusiasm to serve the Gandhi regime, Indira Gandhi regime, he created such wonderful material, archival material for scholars like us and historians like us. So this was all 50 years ago. So one day, I think he decided to speak. People were calling Indira Gandhi dictator. So he decided to address that question. So I read from that. Is Indira Gandhi a dictator? Meanwhile, during his lecture tour, Cowell was bold enough to deliver a speech on the topic, "Is Mrs. Gandhi really the first woman dictator in the world?" He's asking this question and speaking. Perhaps this was his way of being transparent and taking on the most popular idea or doubt or slander in circulation. He began the lecture by saying that the title made two assumptions. One, that Indira Gandhi was a dictator and there have not been women dictators in the past. Laced with sarcasm, he said that America, in its relatively short history, still did not have a woman president, while India had an ancient tradition of having women in the highest places as equals and partners with their men folk. But he argued that, strange as it may seem, it was a historical fact that in no country have women been dictators. even when they occupied thrones in Europe and elsewhere. Then he went on to illustrate how Indira Gandhi fought her rivals, all men, to become the Prime Minister. Perhaps he thought this gender spin might at least drum up support among women in America and within the Indian diaspora. How was she able to do it? This frail, feminine, gentle-looking, soft-spoken woman in her 40s, he asked, and responded to what should have remained a perfect rhetorical question. He said that Indira Gandhi had done it because she was unlike her father, steeped entirely in the Indian mold, and represented the best of Indian womanhood: modesty, pragmatism, sincerity, simplicity, a strong will and determination, an ability to inspire confidence and trust through self-sacrifice and Spartan mode of life. This is Kaul writing. Kaul said that she faced far more difficulties than her father did, yet showed greater courage and clear-sightedness than even he did. So he's clearly putting Indira Gandhi above Jawaharlal Nehru. I don't know how many congressmen know this. Kaul put Indira Gandhi far, far above Jawaharlal Nehru. Kaul argued that no other leader in India had fought as many obscurantists, character assassins, and frustrated politicians. Quote, "The women of India, and I dare say of most countries, are proud of her. The men folk have to grudgingly accept her, but in their male chauvinism must find fault with her by calling her a dictator. I have yet to meet a dictator who could be as gentle and human as Mrs. Gandhi. A dictator is always afraid and acts out of fear, but Mrs. Gandhi is fearless." He then said that a dictator never listens to advice of his colleagues. Perhaps he's assuming that dictators are all men and a woman also is so different, or potential rivals. But his boss was a good listener and consulted opposition leaders in parliament. He's saying all of them were in jail, but he says she consulted opposition leaders in parliament. However, he added that she was not a timid woman who could be cowed down or daunted by the opposition or obstruction. Quote, "Perhaps the one defect in her makeup is that she listens too much, too long, to too many people in her anxiety to win them over. Sometimes this delays action and allows crisis to develop. This is not the quality of a dictator, but the failing of a true democrat. If a failing it be, but once a crisis has arisen or is about to arise, she deals with it in a firm, calculated, and deliberate manner and shows some of her finest qualities. In fact, she's at her best in a crisis. If this is the quality of a dictator, then I think we could all emulate it. A democrat who cannot be firm, decisive, clear-sighted, and action-oriented is no democrat." So this is Kaul, talking about Indira Gandhi. And I've just read a small passage for you. You'll enjoy reading the rest of the chapter because he's very entertaining. 50 years later, you can't take him obviously very seriously, but he was such a, as they say in Hindi, a chalu fellow, that, after the emergency was over, and he had tormented Mr. Anand Kumar, who was sitting here. He had impounded the passport of Hiremat. He had written all kinds of complaints and letters to Indira Gandhi about them. But after the emergency had been lifted and he was writing his memoirs, he went on to say that I had advised her not to clamp the emergency, to lift it. And he also went on to say that, these people were really good. They were really protecting the democracy of India. It was a complete turnaround. But then, he forgot that he had left his papers behind. And that's been a treat to read, sitting in the dingy corners of American archives. So that is the reading. And I'll conclude by just making two statements, because I'm often asked, ever since I've written this book, I'm asked two questions. So I'll address those two questions and conclude my talk today. And I will, of course, be in conversation with the protagonists, so you will hear more about the book. Since I'm often asked, after writing this book, about a declared emergency then and an undeclared emergency today, I would like to address it as following. Indira Gandhi's emergency was claimed 50 years ago. It happened at a different bend of history. The context and circumstances were different. The nuances of its implementation were different. The complexities of the present cannot be defined by using the crutches of the past entirely. That is what happens when moral equivalences are built, innocuously or deliberately. The past cannot be used to obfuscate the present, and similarly, the present cannot be used to obfuscate the past. These exercises are self-defeating for a democracy. The past can offer a reference, but cannot become a complete analogy. Developing a measure for the present and future using events in history is not an unfamiliar exercise. It happens all the time, either to serve the political exigencies of the present or to frame a genuine anxiety. However, we should be aware that such equivalences are also deep political and propaganda games. Their phraseology is devious. I am of the view that the present should be judged as harshly as possible, but independently. The past cannot be cleverly used to negate the crimes of the present. Similarly, the present cannot be used to negate the crimes of the past. Can there not be independent indictments, is my question. Noam Chomsky, the great American intellectual who incidentally supported the Indians for Democracy movement that Hiremat, Anandji, Ravi, and others, I mean, he was one of the first to write letters to Indira Gandhi, and he met them in his MIT campus in Boston. So he, speaking after 9/11, he speaks about this moral equivalence I just told you about. So he spoke to BBC, and he said, moral equivalence is a term of propaganda. He said it was invented to try to prevent us from looking at acts for which we are responsible. He offers examples when he speaks, and just ask the question. So, deriving from that, just ask the question, who does it help when we build a false moral equivalence about the emergency? It only helps the Congress party, which has not regretted the emergency. They have always caveated their responses. That is because it is the dynasty created during the emergency that still controls the party. We should argue for democracy at all times, a more robust one, not become part of the Congress's restoration project or power-seeking project. It is the same as becoming part of many narratives of the BJP, RSS, and the Modi regime. Binaries do not help the cause of democracy. Readers also ask me if Indira Gandhi was not a peculiar contrast of someone who was admired as a strong leader and at the same time called a dictator. Which quality is more true about her is something that I'm asked often when I go to speak. To this, I would like to say that a strong leader is again a term of propaganda. We should not forget that the Congress, with its scaffolding of executive power for many decades, set the narrative, including the narrative where JP was made to look very small. JP was a very principled man, and I'm sure Anandji has more to tell about him. The present regime is only trying to, if the Congress did that, the present regime is only trying to replicate the narrative and build a more muscular one for itself. Democracy's choice cannot be between these two productions and manufacturing. Both establishments have their loyal courtiers who build these narratives. Indira Gandhi was a complex person, shaped by complex history and personal circumstances. She could be gracious, and she could also be dictator. She was both, but gracious to whom and dictator to whom is the question. Thank you very much.